Yo everyone, how are you doing? I'm Ido, your host for this incredible event. Thank you all for joining us for another round of the monthly Dev. So let's start with some personal news. I just moved to a new apartment and my background looks so white. So drop comment with cool items that you want to suggest for me. So my background will look a little bit less boring for the next event. So I appreciate your help with making my wall back there looks so better. So for those of you who don't know the monthly Dev, it's a series of monthly online events where we bring world-class speakers to teach and inspire us all. We organize these events to create a TED-like platform for developers. And today, we have a lineup that will blow up your mind. Emma will start this event by showing us how she used her passion projects to ace a job interview at Google. We will proceed later on with a fireside chat with the one and only Quincy Larson from freeCodeCamp. And finally, at the end of the event, we will have Mark. We will host Mark, who is going to teach us how to use Git effectively. And a special thing that we are trying out today for the first time, we are going to do an after party. Yeah, exactly, after party, you heard me right. We will meet again after this event on Twitter Spaces to talk about the event and everything you want. Basically, it's our chance to hear you talk because most of the time you hear us talking and we want to know you, we want to see you, and we want to talk about everything that matters. And before we jump in to our first talk, you can get some swag. And if you want to get this comfy pillow that you can see in the screen, all you have to do is to share the event, to share this stream on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever. Just make sure to add the monthly dev hashtag, and we will randomly pick the 10 most creative shares. So for our first speaker for today, she is a DevRel at Google, and she is going to inspire us with her creativity and unique way to spark her career path. Please welcome Emma on stage. Hey, Emma. I think you are muted. 1 second. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I got it. Hi. Hi, everyone.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine, very much. Thank you. Are you ready for your talk?
Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, let's go ahead. So I will add your screen and you can roll from here. Good luck.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, so like the wonderful introduction by Ido, my name is Emma Twersky, and I'm a developer relations engineer at Google, specifically working on web frameworks and an incubation team that incorporates a lot of different things. And over the last year, I've gotten a lot of great questions at meetups, but one of the most consistent ones is, what did I do to get this job? And I think that I want to answer that in a little bit of a different way, which is sort of what sparked this talk, which I'm calling Spark ARing a New Career, and talks about AR and all the good things associated. You'll see that since I'm not able to meet anyone in person, I put a lot of myself and AR filters on these slides. So hopefully you enjoy some of them. They're definitely the topic of this. So before I get started, I just want to have like a bunch of caveats. I'm talking about career, but I'm 10% into my career. I feel like a lot of the career talks I hear and am inspired by are people who have this like great success and are senior engineers in these well-established roles. And I'd love to see more people talking about sort of that like mid-level role, which is definitely where I'm talking from. The other thing is that career stories are very much individual. They're not meant to be emulated or directly copied. A lot of mine takes place during a pandemic. So take that with a grain of salt. And the other thing is, I feel like I try not to use the word success or define what that looks like, but success looks like something different for everybody. I don't think that like I'm here to put anyone on a pedestal and say this is what the singular version of success looks like. That said, I've given this talk a few times, and I feel like it always comes across a little controversial. So I'm going to start with my thesis, which is to find things you enjoy working on in technology or not, and then share that passion with people. You'll see that I'm really passionate about AR, VR. It's not directly what I work on at work, but it's what I've used to sort of keep myself interested in technology. And it's where a lot of like that passion of art lies. But I think that the thesis, if you take anything away from this talk, is to go out and seek things you're interested in working on just because you're interested in them, not because they'll better serve you or anything like that. And so with that, let's get started. So just again, to frame sort of what we're talking about, I'm very much talking about my 2020 journey. So I think it goes without said that a lot of that takes place during COVID-19. And so all of this is done behind the veil of a mask. And again, please enjoy all of my selfies. But I was in a place where I thought tech was really cool. And that's why I went into technology. That's why I took computer science college classes. But I also felt like I wasn't really enjoying what I was specifically working on. There were things I really enjoyed. I was at the time an Android engineer working on payments platforms. I really liked some of the stuff I was able to do where I was leading the accessibility team and working group at the company I was working on. And I had space for myself within that company where I took advantage of opportunities I was given. I really enjoyed the fact that I was, again, working on like payments and helping people make bill payments, which is not that interesting, but I was helping people do it who maybe didn't have otherwise means to do so, working on accessibility within Android. And I liked feeling like I was making a difference, but I wanted to try out new things. And I felt like I'd been pigeonholed into this place where I like was an Android engineer 4 years out of college, and that's all I knew how to do. But I wanted to try out something new. So the first sort of point was to pursue what I enjoyed. So I had this notion that I already had to be good at something to try it out. I think that that's a huge thing in computer science. I think all of us like sat in a CS 101 course of some sort or in the like first day of a boot camp, and somebody around you already knew how to code. And that seemed really normal. That's one of the biggest reasons people don't enter tech is they feel like they already need to know how to do the thing, which is kind of ridiculous because there's not 100 courses before CS 101. Like the point is you should be brand new at that thing. And so just to slash a line through it, you have to sort of break that idea, right? I had a really hard time breaking the idea of like, if I want to try out something new, I have to be okay at being like pretty terrible at it and learning my way up. And so outside of work, I really like art. That's what I do. I like to go to art museums. That's one of the main reasons I used to travel. I really hope that comes back. I like to doodle. I do a lot of sketchnoting. And art is really cool, right? I was living in DC. The Smithsonian museums are free. And I saw a TikTok that was talking about this sort of like Venn diagram of finding a place where what you're doing with your life, hopefully, and maybe that's career, maybe that's outside of work, is hopefully at this crux of finding things that you're skilled in, that you are passionate about, and that there's some sort of demand for, right? So like, I would love to be a cat pet owner, but there's probably not a lot of demand for that. I felt like I was more in this like lower thing where there was skill and demand for software engineers, but maybe I didn't have the passion for specifically what I was working on. And so I was trying to like push myself up into this like center apex. And the thing I really started to look at was the fact that there's all these types of art there, and digital art is a huge domain. And there's all these different forms, right? So there's experiential art, things like Random International has a rain room where you like walk through a room that's raining completely, and the rain stops wherever you're standing using like motion sensors. There's all these like really cool things, right? We know 3D printing, online art, and then there's AR, VR. And normally what I thought of as AR, VR is like Google Arts and Culture, like you can walk through the Louvre with like this like magnificent technological thing. But I also think that there's a space that's opened up in AR, VR and in a lot of technology for new creators or non-traditional creators. And so the technology I found sort of just by like random looking was this thing called Spark AR, which is the title of the talk. But what Spark AR is it's a Facebook technology developed by Facebook that uses the Facebook suite of apps. And it's basically this idea of creating filters, or if you've opened Instagram or Facebook recently, it's sort of like snowballed into this thing where anytime you open any of their photo applications, there's these filters. And what it's actually doing is creators and technologists around the world are creating those filters and distributing them. And I thought it was cool because I was working in a color theory class at the time, and I wanted to be able to capture the colors in photos. And I was looking for a way to like interact with photos I was taking and get colors from them and draw themes and palettes from them. And I wanted to do something like that. But I also saw opportunity because it was significantly cheaper than those other technologies that I was sort of looking at and saying like, hey, that would be a cool space of technology to go into. It was significantly easier. It was accessible. It's just like a program you download on a computer. It's not like buying a 3D printer, which is getting cheaper, but is not the cheapest thing for a student. And then it's also being used by millions of users, right? Like we all have an Instagram, we have reach through that. It's distributable. You don't have to like fly to this like art exhibit to do the thing. And so I found this new thing, and I felt like a crow where I'd like collected a shiny object and I wanted to know how to use it. So the next point is to seek out and recognize opportunity. So I'd found this cool thing and I thought it could be cool, but I didn't know really how to like use it, but I saw opportunity in it. So I sort of went and explored through it. And I went through what ended up being like a very typical software engineer attack of like a life cycle where you create things. So you download this thing called Spark AR Studio. It's free to download online, and it's a drag and drop interface, but it's also a patch editor. It turns out that the developer is using it. I downloaded it in like a alpha release. So there were like 2,000 people using this thing just like by happenstance. And there were all of these hacks. So you could like open the patch editor and actually like build in JavaScript, all of these things, even though it was meant to be drag and drop. And I created these things. I started engaging with the platform, right? They were releasing almost bi-weekly. So there were change logs you were able to keep up and date. There was a feedback loop where you were able to give feedback and directly connect with the developers working on it. So you were close to that sort of open source development that they were following, not quite open source. I tested and iterated. So I was creating these filters. A lot of them were really weird. This is like a weird kind of very creepy robot thing. That's one of their like main demos. But I iterated on them. I was able to share them through my phone. Again, super accessible. And then I exported and uploaded them. And the thing about all of this is that I was sort of learning as I was going, and I was documenting how I was doing this because it was super new, right? So I found and sought out this opportunity that I thought could be cool. It had more of that, like, it was more in that crux of like something I could be passionate about, but I still was using my skills as an engineer to sort of hack and learn through this life cycle. And so all of this was about learning the process, right? I sort of realized that this was an opportunity for me to learn about a new process as it was happening. And then I was able to measure the impact, right? So I was seeing immediate results where like within a month of uploading, I was seeing like 500,000 people-ish like using these filters. It was really easy to go viral, which like was very, not the point of it, but it was very encouraging when you're trying to look at just like seeing things happen. There were all kinds of cool things happening around social events. So for example, during protests, I had a filter that blurred out faces that was being used. I meant it just as sort of like a fun anonymity thing, but people were taking these filters and creating different meanings with them. And so it was really encouraging to see sort of, again, this like global feedback loop. And again, just socializing them, right? So they're living on your profile, they're sort of attached to your name, but more so there's just like this huge community of people creating all of these really artistic things. It's super shareable. It was really cool to see these effect galleries of all of the cool things people were doing, right? Somebody put their face on a head of corn. I think there's a lot of creativity out there. We've probably all seen all of the different forms of filters. And so I felt like I had found this really cool feedback loop where I wasn't necessarily looking for it, but I was looking for something to spark my passion and technology again, outside of just like delivering a product manager's goals for a product, which is great. but not necessarily where I was like passionate about technology anymore. And so I had sparked interest here. And I just want to say it's totally okay to stop here. So I think we're in this space in the world where monetizing passion is like really common. There's a ton on TikTok about people who like learn to sew and then decide that they have to open an Etsy shop and sell everything they sew. And I don't necessarily think that's true, right? If you enjoy something, if you found something that sparks interest, that's a hobby. Hobbies are great. They don't have to be monetized. I don't think that this is going to play, but it's okay to stop there. That said, I wanted to continue. I wanted to share this thing. I felt like I had found a cool thing and I wanted to socialize it. And so I reflected on the experiences of like, why did I like this thing? So why did I like Spark AR? I felt like it fostered creativity in a positive manner. I felt like what I was missing was like a way to foster my technological creativity. And so I was, again, taking these art theory classes. I really liked color. I liked palettes. I wanted to take those color swatches from the photos I was taking. I wanted to be able to like go out in nature and take photos and then like do something with that and palettes. But I also enjoyed some of those other things I've touched on, right? It was free. It was easy to use. I felt like it had immediate global reach and it was shareable. And I liked being a part of this like creator community. And this like community sort of surrounding it. That was really the thing I liked. And what that ended up being was sort of a model of open source, right? I really liked, again, this was like a Facebook group because it's a Facebook technology, but I liked the community surrounding it. At the time I joined, there were like 2,000 really passionate people. The Facebook group has grown up to like 60,000 people. So again, still small, still very passionate, but there were collaborators that were working on teaching, on problem solving, on triaging, that really wanted this like technology to do better. And so it followed this open source model that I really enjoyed engaging with. I feel like open source is a really cool thing to be a part of. And I hadn't stumbled upon that before. And it sounded a lot like a typical developer community, but a little bit rare because not everyone was technological, right? At its core, if you're not opening patch editors and like hacking the JavaScript of it, it is a drag and drop interface. So there were artists, there were people from like all around the world doing this like large, diverse set of things with these filters. There was a huge movement of trying to make sure that filters weren't like negative for people's mental health so that you weren't just like editing someone to look like they had plastic surgery. There was not a lot of advertising of what this was. People were just doing it for fun. It was hard to monetize at the time. And so again, it was just people doing this for fun outside of work. And that was really cool to be a part of. And I wanted to know why else people were doing this. And so I think that, again, talking about open source, what I really connected to was realizing like my GitHub profile is another form of that Facebook profile, right? It's another open source thing. I also, again, loved the diversity of what people were doing. So here's a filter of like juggling heads. It's like kind of freaky, kind of cool. All kinds of cool warped effects. These are effects from South Korea, from Dubai. People putting their head on like a shrimp in a shrimp market. Just like things that brought me joy. They're definitely weird. Gamification, right? I think we've all seen the like Tetris games where you play Tetris with your nose or you guess what like a phrase of gibberish says. But people are also doing things with social impact. So here's like a Metro card map where when you scan a Metro card of like a Manhattan card, you can see a whole subway map. So super useful things during COVID. You started to see a lot of people pop up with like social distancing filters of like being able to use AR to sort of supplement an understanding of what 6 feet apart really looks like, all of these really cool things. And so I landed in this place where I liked the creative direction, I liked art, I liked what I was doing, but I was in technology. And my role was a software engineer, and I felt like I had gone into this path and I was pigeonholed. And so I had this like cool thing I was doing on the side where I was doing these AR filters. But at the end of the day, I was a software engineer. And so it took me a really long time to be like, okay, I like creative direction, I like art, and I'm in technology. And I don't think those things have to be separate. And if you really drill down what that whole process was of discovery of the open source development that I went through, I wasn't looking for a new job at the time. I was really in the software engineer cycle. But what I had essentially done was go through a development life cycle, right? I had created, I had iterated, deployed, shared, learned, right? Like this is a very typical life cycle. Use the words that you want here. And so what that led me to do is redefine what that technology piece that I thought I was in was. And I revisited that same Venn diagram and realized that what I could do was I was sitting in this SWE role, and what my passion was sharing the technologies, not necessarily Spark AR. I don't work for Facebook, but I thought it was cool, and I thought I could blog about it and share it and show other people who didn't know about this thing how to do this thing. And I thought that was really cool. And there's tons of jobs in technology that aren't SWE, that aren't the title of software engineer. And I wish someone had told me that, like, the day that I entered software engineering, because I think that's not something people hear enough, especially early on in their career. But what I found was a role called developer advocacy. My job has since changed to developer relations engineer. There's a lot of nuance in that, but also it literally means nothing. And what that means is I just wanted to be able to work on technology and then share it and do that in a 50-50 split. Right? There's things I'm skilled at. I'm a good cook. I am a great cat owner. There's things that there's demand for, business analysts, these things that land in these different parts. But what I felt like was at the center of where I was passionate was using technology to share and socialize with the world. And so what I really realized I was doing was finding space to tell that story. And so I used exactly this story. I had gone through, I had learned Spark AR, I had these AR filters. I thought I found a cool technology other people didn't know about, and I socialized it. And I found space to tell this story. Passion projects make the best stories, right? Like being passionate about something, not just assign something because you have to work on it, is where I find people really sparkle. And passion is good, right? Like I created filters related to Google. I presented that to Google in my packet and said, hey, like, look, I'm different because I'm passionate about these things. I know how to tell the stories of my journey in learning these things, how to get people to use these things. And what I really realized was if we go through sort of the points I just told, this is how I sort of presented myself when I went out job searching. Again, that common question is like, how many leak codes did you do? On paper, what was your GPA? And all of these things. And I think that software engineers are so much more than that. We're passionate people that have these side projects. And open source is a great way to do that, right? So I pursued what I enjoyed. I found art. I found this crux of art and technology. I found opportunity within that and a technology I thought was new. I went out and developed in that technology and then reflected on how I had done that, sort of the space that I could share that. I rethought what technology meant and whether or not this new technology could be a part of that. And then I found space to tell that. And so an iteration of this deck is what I presented to Google. But if we sort of synthesize this down even more, I guess what I'm saying is within the open source community, there's all types of things that I think people are communicating and passionate about. And I'd love to see more people engage in that community and find things that they're passionate about working on and then share that passion. I love hearing about different technologies and things that I don't know about. And I would love to see presentations on those things. And I'm always super interested in what other people are working on. So do things you're passionate about, share them, and tag me on Twitter with all of those things that you're working on. I'd love to hear about them. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Emma. Actually, like it's my first time to hear about your career path, and it sounds very awesome that you managed to find, the role that exactly matches your passion. And it's super great.
Yeah, I'm super lucky to have found that.
Yeah, also I think that not many developers, like when you talk about passion projects or side projects, like they don't think about filters and all this creative stuff, like creative applications.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think like being able to tell stories of things you're passionate about doesn't have to be your career, but I do think it's worth thinking about how you can share those things with others, right? Like, I think that's the part of open source kind of missing is like, if you're passionate about a niche thing, I want to hear about it. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So thank you very much for sharing your story. I'm sure that it helped lots of people here and inspired them. So thank you very much. Keep going on with your mission and spread the word. And it will make an impact for sure.
yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. So before we proceed to our next talk or interview for today, I would like to share with you that yesterday we had such a major milestone. It was such an important date for us because we officially launched our long-awaited web app on Product Hunt. And we got so much love and support from you folks on Product Hunt and on Twitter and everywhere. And it's exactly what we needed and exactly what we need to keep going, to keep providing you more features and more cool stuff. And if you are unfamiliar with daily.dev, so let me just add back the screen, sorry. So if you're unfamiliar with daily.dev, it's an all-in-one coding newsreader. We aggregate content from over 400 sources and rank it for you with the help of our growing community. So do try it out after the event. Simply go to your browser and add daily.dev. And for the next talk for today, we have the one and only Quincy Larson, the founder of freeCodeCamp, one of the most inspiring teachers in the developers community. I'm personally very excited towards this session. And usually I ask the speaker if he's ready, and this time, because it's an interview, I have to ask myself whether I'm ready. But anyway, let's do it. So please welcome Quincy on stage.
Hey everyone, can you hear
me? I'm great, thank you. Pretty excited. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I read Daily Dev. I get the emails, and it's a really cool way to stay on top of developments in software development.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for joining us and dedicating the time. Yeah, let's roll, and I can just welcome everyone in the audience. You can share your comments, you can share your questions to Quincy, and I make sure to curate the best of them and ask him live. So this is your chance. Okay, so let's start with some ice-breaking kind of question, you know, the usual ones. So please describe Quincy Larson with 3 words.
Teacher at freeCodeCamp, I guess. Yeah, that's the best way to describe me. That's my main defining trait.
Yeah, it's also the image that I had in mind, you know. You're like a combination, you know, of founder / businessman and also a teacher. For me, like this sounds like a great combination. Like you have to maybe balance it. Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit the story of freeCodeCamp and how it all started, how it came here to life?
Yeah, absolutely. So this, it's a little autobiographical, so forgive me for talking about myself, but I was a teacher. I was 31 years old. Every day I went to the school and I wore a suit and I talked to the teachers, and one of the things that was very apparent was all the students at the school wanted to be spending more time with the teachers, but the teachers had to spend a lot of time doing paperwork. So I was like, maybe I can figure out some ways to automate some of that paperwork. Now, I didn't know very much at all about programming, but I just kind of naively started Googling things, and I figured out, I can use like this script and this tool to like automate Excel spreadsheets and things like that, automate like forms on the web, kind of like early scraping, but it wasn't very sophisticated at all. It was somebody who has been programming for a few weeks, basically figuring these things out from Google. But it worked, and the students learned. The students got to spend more time with the teachers. The teachers were happy. The school, everything improved after that, and it was like, wow! It was just like some dude who like sat down and learned some basic programming was able to make a big difference. So that's when I decided, I need to learn to code proper. So I spent like 7 months learning to code by myself, just reading books at the library, using online courses like edX and Coursera and things like that. And eventually I got a job as a software engineer. I did that for a while, and I was like, I want to teach people all the things I'm learning. So I was able to go and just spend a whole lot of time building different technology education tools, which nobody cared about. Like I spent years building tools that nobody used, and eventually I just got lucky. And in the course of like 3 days, I like stayed up really late, like building a prototype, and I got it online. And I had this chat room, and people would join the chat room and like talk and be like, "Oh, this is kind of cool, but the curriculum sucks." And I was like, well, help me fix the curriculum, help me make it better. So a lot of it was just people coming and contributing. And, very much like for me, it was just a matter of luck. Like I just kept trying things and failing over and over until one of them kind of worked. And that was freeCodeCamp.
Wow. Yeah. Actually, what I love about your journey that you shared is that you learned programming to solve a problem. Like you didn't want to start with it. You did it, to cut the paperwork and get things more automated.
Yeah, and that's a common criticism of me as a developer is that I'm not like in love with programming for the sake of programming. I just view it as a tool, just like I view databases as tools or CRM as a tool, or scripting is just yet another tool in your toolbox to accomplish whatever work you need to accomplish. So I'm not like a dyed-in-the-wool like hardcore programmer.
Yeah, but that's cool because it's quite a rare kind of point of view in the industry, I think. Many people just start, I want to be a software engineer. And you did it quite the opposite. Like you use it to do something else.
Absolutely. I'm seeing some great questions here in the comments. We're going to get to those at the end, I believe, after Ido goes through the main questions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I just want to make sure I get a chance to answer some of these great questions I see popping up.
Yeah, if you want to pop in some question, let me know and we can.
We can go ahead and go through the full interview and get to all your questions. Then I can just I'll copy these over to my clipboard and answer them after the meeting, or after you're done. So if anybody has questions for me, just drop them in chat. I'll try to get to them in a minute.
Perfect. Yeah. So going back to your story, what was the first programming language that you learned?
The first programming language I learned was Python. I started with Python, and then I quickly switched to Ruby because I got a job as a Ruby developer. And I always kind of put off learning JavaScript. I was like, JavaScript's a hard one. Right? But like, it's unavoidable. You can't do anything in software development without touching, Node.js or touching at least some front end, on-click events and stuff like that, right? So I very quickly shifted to JavaScript as my primary language, and to this day, I still recommend everybody just tough it up and start with JavaScript because it's so widely useful. You can do pretty much anything in JavaScript. In fact, Jeff Atwood, the creator of Stack Overflow, has this famous quote. He says, "Any program that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript." JavaScript, they say software is eating the world. Well, JavaScript is eating software. So if there's one skill you want to get good at, I would recommend getting really good at basic JavaScript scripting and learning how to use that tool ecosystem, the NPM ecosystem. Okay,
so here is the first tip, I guess. So
but Python's great. I don't mean to talk bad about Python and Ruby. They're both good, and we do teach Python, but I think it's a good second language.
Yeah, every language has its domain, and it's important to understand it. Like there is no right or wrong. There is just the right tool for the right problem, as you mentioned before.
Yeah.
So in this journey, is there any what was the most memorable moment in this journey?
I would say the most memorable moment was when I was sitting in chat, like working on the code base. I was probably like on live stream. I spent the first 2 years of building freeCodeCamp. Like I was on Twitch pretty much constantly, like building it in public.
Oh.
And like somebody joined in the chat. They're like, I got a job. I was like, what do you mean you got a job? They're like, I got a job as a software engineer. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And they had used freeCodeCamp as their primary resource to learn to code. And so that was when I was like, wow, this is actually working. Like people are actually using these resources and going out and being able to get jobs or getting, freelance clients or, becoming their own technical co-founder with their startup or nonprofit, whatever they're doing. So that revelation, that was really when we turned the corner psychologically. We went from, okay, this could theoretically work to like, hey, this worked for so-and-so. And then shortly after, more and more people were getting jobs. And then it became kind of like the proven path to getting a developer job that it is today. Like you don't necessarily have to have a computer science degree to be able to get a job as a developer now. And I think like that was probably always true, but it's easier than ever to find free learning resources that are high quality that you can use to get a job. And it's not just freeCodeCamp that's contributing to it. There are lots of awesome projects, lots of awesome creators on YouTube, people publishing on their personal blogs, just making this easier for everybody. So, but freeCodeCamp has definitely, like for us, from our perspective, like that was the big turning point, was when people were starting to get jobs within the community.
Yeah, doing such an impact like today, freeCodeCamp is impacting the whole developers community. I bet this is something that burns, like make you fire from the inside and put you with lots of motivation to go on and bring more content and help more people get on board the industry, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it just inspired the whole community. Like that, each win kind of compounds, and you feel that forward momentum.
Yeah, I remember, at least when I first discovered freeCodeCamp, it was like several years ago. I think it was the web development kind of course where you teach React and MongoDB and Node.js. I was like immediately became an ambassador and just send out this course to everyone I know that wanted to started with tech. And I remember that I got back like great feedback from people that considered whether it's for them or not.
Exactly.
Yeah, but anyway, let's go on and can you share like today what is the status of freeCodeCamp today? Can you share some numbers, like how many developers were certified recently, monthly readers, etc., whatever you have?
Yeah. So I can tell you, we have about 500,000 people who use freeCodeCamp every day, like that visit freecodecamp.org.
Wow.
So it's surreal to think about that, but yeah, mostly people accessing like the reference, like /learn. And I see Tapas in here. He's a very accomplished author. I actually just emailed him a minute ago. Check your email, Tapas. I sent you some new story ideas. But Tapas is one of many authors who write these really practical kind of nuts and bolts tutorials for how to like accomplish very specific things or how to understand certain things. Like he wrote an entire book about JavaScript arrays, like everything you need to know about JavaScript arrays. So yeah, that's pretty typical of what we publish. And then of course we've got the core curriculum, which is like an interactive learning experience where you work through a linear progression of learning resources from, starting with like very basic web development to back-end development to eventually like Python and scientific computing and ultimately data science. And we're building that out. We're building out 12 new certifications focused on data science. But yeah, that a lot of people use freeCodeCamp every day. A lot of people watch the YouTube channel. I think we're maybe the biggest programming channel on YouTube now. about 1.5 million hours of people sitting there watching every month.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
It's a lot of time spent learning.
Yeah, actually, we know Tapas. I've seen lots of his work also on Daily and on Ashnode.
Yeah.
He's doing great work, as you mentioned.
Yeah, he's a rising star.
Yeah, and he's also here on YouTube, so he sent some good words, good comments here. What's the one thing that most of us don't know about you or about FreeCodeCamp?
I think one thing that people may not realize is how small FreeCodeCamp is as an organization. It may seem like it's like as big as like Khan Academy or as big as like, for example, some of these startups like Codecademy or something like that. And in terms of people using FreeCodeCamp, yeah, we are about nearly the same amount of people use FreeCodeCamp as use like Khan Academy and stuff like that. And more people use FreeCodeCamp than use like a lot of sites like Udacity and Codecademy and stuff like that. But in terms of the actual organization size, it's only a dozen people or so, and our budget is very small. I think the last tax report that, like, as a nonprofit, as a public charity, we have to file these public tax reports, which you can check out on FreeCodeCamp's website if you look for it. It's called a 990. But that's like the traditional U.S. IRS form that nonprofits fill out every year. It's their annual report. But we had our total budget for that year was $498,000, which sounds like a lot of money to an individual person. Like, wow, that's a lot of money. Like, that's like years and years worth of my earnings. But for an entire organization to run on that with several people, we have to really get inventive and be very resourceful with the funds we have. So I think that's probably one of the more surprising things. Like, people assume that we're this giant organization, that we've got like, millions and millions of dollars. Like Khan Academy has like a budget of like $80 million a year, $100 million a year, right? And like FreeCodeCamp is like 1/100 of that, less than 1/100 of that. And yet we're doing kind of a comparable amount of work. Although Khan Academy is servicing like kids, we're focused on just adults. That's all we focus on is teaching adults, specifically career changers and people that are already working as developer who want to become increasingly technical and further expand their skills.
Yeah, so yeah, this is very inspiring to see how I can't say little, but with you are very resourceful, as you mentioned it, and I think it's a skill that you develop over time, and you can make such an impact with so little, and this is amazing, and this actually goes immediately to the next question, which is how can we, as FreeCodeCamp users, readers, audience, and whatnot, how can we support your cause and help you grow and help you achieve your mission?
Yeah, well, there are two major ways you can do that. Of course, if you happen to be wealthy or just have like, if you've got like a middle-class software engineer job and you have the resources to support FreeCodeCamp, please consider donating. You can either do like just one-time donations as you see fit, or you can just sign up to give us like US $5 a month or some other amount. If you email me and you're like, hey, Quincy, can I give you $20 a month? Like, I'll go in and create like a custom like thing on PayPal and send that to you. So you can just donate whatever amount you want a month. But for most people, $5 seems to be like an amount that is not too big of an inconvenience for them. Like most people who are, about half of the people who use FreeCodeCamp are living off of like $5 a day US. Like that's half the people on earth are living in those circumstances. Many of them don't even have a laptop. They're using FreeCodeCamp on their Android phone, for example. So we're working on an Android app to make it easier for those people to use FreeCodeCamp, and it's going to be like hopefully it'll be a full-on like code editor where you can actually, it's like a laptop. But anyway, I don't mean to go off too far of a tangent. That's something we're actively working on, and we've actually already secured funding to build up that. We got a generous donation from a gentleman. I'm probably going to announce it soon. But the main way that you can help is just, in addition to donating, is contribute to freeCodeCamp. And there are several ways you can contribute to freeCodeCamp. I would encourage you to go to like contribute.freecodecamp.org, and there's like a whole list of different things. Like one way is if you speak a language in addition to English, you can help translate freeCodeCamp into, Farsi or Arabic or Hindi or Tamil, or really any of these different languages. We've already translated into Spanish and Chinese, and we're almost done with like German, almost done with Japanese. So that's a huge help. Another thing is, of course, writing articles. If you Google like how to become an author on freeCodeCamp, you'll find our style guide. And we're very selective about whom we accept, but you can keep reapplying every 3 or 4 months. and you can use like a blog like Hashnode, or you can just launch your own blog and you can practice writing. And eventually you'll probably, after you have enough practice, you'll probably be able to get onto the freeCodeCamp publication. And it's very widely read, and it is worth applying to become an author if you want to be widely read, even though it's a lot of work to comply. We have high standards, but we're going to distribute you pretty widely. And then, of course, if you want to just get on GitHub and contribute to our code base, that's another way. So contributing either through donations or through donating your expertise in the form of like open source contributions. Those are both excellent ways to support the community.
Yeah, perfect. So if you just joined now, this is your chance to help freeCodeCamp to grow. So we encourage you to either do some kind of a donation or contribute content to freeCodeCamp. You can start immediately after this event, no excuses. So I think let's take a quick break now for audience questions. Okay, and then if we have some time, we will go back to some of my questions.
Sure, I've got quite a few questions that I've kind of copy pasted out of here.
Okay,
if you have some specific ones you want to ask me, that's great. One person I want to recognize in the audience is Farhan Hassan Chowdhury. He is a prolific contributor to the freeCodeCamp publication. Wow. He publishes full-length books on like Docker and Kubernetes and stuff like that, like basically free books. You can go pay O'Reilly a bunch of money for a book, or you can get Farhan's version, which is edited by us and includes tons of examples, very exhaustive, and it just loads in a browser. You can save it to your hard drive and read it that way. But definitely check out his work. He is doing as much for the open source community as anybody. In my opinion, he's a legend. Yeah.
So let's see, there is a question here. So what advice do you have for someone like me who jumps from one language to another without completely grasping the concept of the previous?
Sure. If you learn one language really well, then it's easy to learn other languages. And I'd recommend starting with a high-level scripting language like Python or JavaScript, and just moving down the stack if you want to learn C++, or if you want to learn C, or if you want to like go even deeper than that. The main thing is if you're jumping around a whole lot, you're just learning the same basic concepts over and over. You're not going deep, right? You're a mile wide and an inch deep, right? You want to go much deeper. And the deeper you get with any specific language, and even PHP, languages like that have like big communities that you can really get involved. You can contribute to the code base, and you can become really good. You're going to have a lot better job opportunities if you're really good at one language than if you've got the proverbial LinkedIn that has 20 different skills that you're endorsed for or whatever. People don't want to see on your resume 20 different programming languages. They want to see one programming language that you're really good at and maybe a secondary one that you can also use. But if you learn one, then you can pretty easily port the concepts and that's another thing, is just focus on the underlying concepts. Don't focus on the implementation details as much, because those primary concepts, most of those were invented 60, 70 years ago, right? Alan Turing invented a lot of those concepts himself, right? Some of them go all the way back to Ada Lovelace, right? When you're talking about basic algorithm concepts, and a lot of the concepts are rooted in mathematics that was pioneered in India and in Iraq and places like that, thousands of years ago. So yes, don't get too hung up on the tools, focus on the underlying concepts, and then you'll just be able to recombine and understand on an intuitive level going forward. If that helps.
Perfect. Do you ever feel discouraged on the process?
When I was learning to code, I felt discouraged all the time.
Something specific in the process that made you feel this way?
Yeah, just seeing other people be like effortlessly putting things together. And what I came to realize is, oh, those people aren't necessarily smarter than me. They just have a whole lot more practice than I do. So realizing like when somebody's like, jumping between tabs and like, banging out code really quickly, or they just see like a bunch of, UML diagrams on the chalkboard and they immediately kind of understand and they can have a discussion around that. Like that comes from experience and practice. That's not something that, you're going to learn from a book or from a video. That's like something you're going to learn from spending a whole lot of time banging your head against your desk trying to understand things.
Yeah, and although I know it's very much unavoidable to compare yourselves to others, you should try and avoid it as much as possible because everyone has a different path and need different time. And sometimes comparing yourself to others may cause, depression and other negative feelings. So don't rush into comparing yourselves to others. I guess this is my tip, at least.
Okay, and I have a bunch of like rapid fire questions I could answer, just like one sentence answers.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
First of all, congratulations to Erikson Okur, who was able to transition 3 years ago. He used freeCodeCamp and earned 2 certifications and used a bunch of YouTube and Udemy courses, and he's now working as a software engineer, full stack. Congratulations, Erikson. Megan Gutschel, helping co-organize freeCodeCamp Philadelphia. Thank you so much. We're working on some new tools as the pandemic subsides. We're going to launch this new tool that'll make it really easy to coordinate events. Would you like to or recommend? So I would just recommend focusing on giving everybody chances to do tech talks. I think that's a great opportunity because everybody can come forward and spend like 10 minutes, presenting something. And that's critical. Like when I was learning to code, I would go to the local hackerspace and I'd present about different things. And that forced me to learn them. And it also I made my mistakes in front of a small supportive audience who could correct me rather than doing it in front of like a big audience of like hundreds of people at a big conference. But definitely like that's a good way to, if you can get like a projector or even just turn laptops around and talk about something in a cafe, that's a really good way to get practice. So I would emphasize that. Wisdom Udo wants to become an ambassador in Kano State, Nigeria. Yeah, awesome. We're going to have like a formal process for becoming kind of a study group leader over there. Let's see, a couple other things. Are there any courses on blockchain and Ethereum? Asks Harsh Diwakar. Yes, if you search Solidity on Google, you'll actually see like, just scroll down a little bit, you'll see a freeCodeCamp course on YouTube. And of course, we've got, tons of courses on EVM. We even got some courses on like NFTs and stuff if you Google around. And with freeCodeCamp, everything's free. And you can count on it to be well vetted and, everything that we're recommending legit. Let's see. Any advice for people who are living in, so Ovidio Perez asks, what advice do you have for someone who lives in a third world country and want to find a good job, like a remote job? So first of all, on the internet, everybody's on kind of a level playing field. I mean, there's like connectivity issues and things like that. But my advice would be to really work on your English and get it like native speaker-like. And freeCodeCamp, we're going to create some English education resources to help people who already know basic English like they learned it in high school, but they just want to take it up to the level where they could go apply to get into Y Combinator, or they could, give like a big demo at like a big conference or something like that. So working on your English, that's one of the main apprehensions that like I think a lot of people have is just like if they see typos and things, they think, oh, this is like, maybe this person is going to misunderstand what I'm asking for. Communication issues. But if you can meet with them on Google Meet or on Zoom and speak like a native speaker of like, European English or American English, that does help a lot. I would also recommend just not thinking too much about the fact that you're, you use the term third world, which we don't really even use that much anymore. Like, I think the United Nations stopped using that term because there are rich people in every country. There are poor people in every country. Yes, the poor people in America, in the United States, are probably not as poor as, the poorest people in like Bangladesh or something like that. But, the internet is kind of equalizing things a little bit. So I do think that things are heading in the right direction. And sorry, my kids are playing in the background. Don't approach it with that limited mindset. Like, for example, I didn't get a CS degree. Okay, that's like a comparative thing. Like, often I would go into like job interviews, or when I would go to events, I'd be like, oh yeah, but I don't have a CS degree, so I'm kind of like an imposter. I'm like an outsider. I wasn't born in the United States. I didn't grow up in like San Francisco and go to like all the schools that like, Mark Zuckerberg went to and stuff like that, right? Like that might be a way that you're pushing this and you're thinking about this, but and just to be clear, I was born in the United States. I was born in like the middle of the country in like kind of a relatively poor place, but I wasn't like, yeah. Anyway, don't overthink it is what I'm saying. Sorry, that's a very long answer, but don't let yourself get daunted. Don't start thinking, oh, those American developers are so much better or anything like that. No, you can be just as good a developer wherever you are if you spend the time and put in the energy to learn the skills.
You're still over there.
Yeah, I'll see you kids later.
You're still over there.
Yeah, so cute, adorable.
So yeah, I hope that just rapid fire answering some of those questions. Is there any way to donate to freeCodeCamp other than PayPal? Yes, if you search freeCodeCamp ways to donate, you'll find an article that has like, cryptocurrency wallets. You can mail us a check. You can do all kinds of different ways you can donate. Actually, if you want to mail checks, there's 0 transaction costs on checks, unless you're mailing from a different currency. Then there's like a Forex fee. But yeah.
Yeah. So. Last question before we wrap up. We talked about an Android app that is coming pretty soon. Are there any future plans for freeCodeCamp beside it?
Yeah, well, the data science curriculum, we're almost done with a big pledge drive. If you're interested in supporting that pledge drive, we're raising $150,000 US, and we've gotten the creator of Thinkful. He founded Thinkful. He has agreed to like match all the donations 100%. So he's no longer at Thinkful. He like sold the company, and he just does a lot of woodworking. He's a really chill guy. I talk to him all the time. His name's Daryl Silver. But he basically, if you donate to freeCodeCamp for this pledge drive, Daryl is going to take like 100% match anything you donate. And so that's going to be 12 certifications going to cover university level math. So assuming that you didn't get an engineering degree in university, no big deal. You're going to know most of the math that people who did get an engineering degree know, because we're going to teach, algebra, calculus, linear algebra, statistics, all those subjects, and then of course we're going to cover like data analysis, data engineering, and then the 3 big branches of machine learning. Which are supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning, and then maybe even some transfer learning. So that curriculum expansion, which is going to go from like 10 certifications to like closer to 20, that is something that we're working on actively. And then of course the Android app. Those are the 2 biggest things. And then the localization effort, which is we've already got all the tools in place. It's just a matter of like translating things and rolling out the additional languages. And we'd love to roll out, like, for example, an Arabic language YouTube channel. We already have a Hindi language YouTube channel. If anybody speaks Hindi and they want to record some courses for that, definitely reach out to me or reach out to Pawan Kumar, who runs the channel. He's a very prolific developer educator. And so localization, Android app, data science and machine learning curriculum. Those are the 3 focal points for 2021, 2022.
Sounds like tons of work to do. And I can't wait to see the data science curriculum already out and check it out. So last question from the audience, Vaibhav. He says, hey Quincy, what do you think about coding education in the future? How will it transform? How would you transform or change it?
Yeah, well, I hope it'll become more interactive because I really do think people learn by doing more than reading or watching a video. Now, those are useful as well, though. But if we can figure out ways to make things more interactive, I think that's a big win. And Replit and Scrimba and a lot of organizations are working on creating these really good environments where you can just code right in the browser. And there's some good open source IDEs that you can use on a phone for getting coding to work on a phone interactively. That's a real hard problem. We're going to do our best to tackle that, but it's not an easy problem. I think that's the future, though, is increasingly interactive, tight feedback loop where you run your code, the tests fail, within a few seconds that you made a mistake somewhere, and you can start figuring out what that mistake was. The tighter the feedback loop, the more of a flow state you can get, and the more of a flow state you can get, the more fun and rewarding the learning process becomes.
Perfect. Actually, there are a few more questions on YouTube, so if you can, at the end of this session, to go inside YouTube and maybe try to catch up with some of the people, I bet they will appreciate it if you have the time. Yeah,
if you share that YouTube link as well, I'd like to tweet it out. I didn't get a chance to tweet in advance because my kids have been crazy, but I'll tweet up a link to the interview. Perfect. I will try to share the link to YouTube on the private chat as soon as we finish. So thank you very much, Quincy. I had the pleasure to talk to you. You really do a magnificent work for the all developers community. And I would like to thank you on behalf of me and all the audience here. So thank you very much. Thank you so much, Ido. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. And for all of you who are contributing to freeCodeCamp's curriculum or donating to the cause, much appreciated. And I hope you all have a fantastic day. You too. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Bye. Our last speaker for today is the maintainer of a very popular package that you probably know. He is the maintainer of Redux. He is going to show us how to use Git effectively for our version control. Show some love to Mark in the comments. Hey, Mark.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Thank you for joining us for this event.
Very glad to be here.
So, yeah, good luck. Go ahead. Here is your screen.
All right. Hi, my name is Mark Erikson, and today I'm very happy to talk to you about how to use Git effectively. A few things about myself. I will answer questions about React and Redux basically anywhere there is a text box on the internet. I collect lots of links to anything that looks particularly interesting or useful, articles, libraries, resources, and tools. I write some very long blog posts, mostly about React and Redux, but also some other things like some bits of advice I found useful in my own career. And I am a Redux maintainer. I've spent a lot of my time working on the Redux documentation, some time working on React Redux and Redux Toolkit. But if you don't know me for any of those things, then you might know me as that guy with the Simpsons avatar, which has sort of become my calling card on the internet. But today I'm not actually here to talk about Redux. I'm here to talk to you about Git. Git is today's standard version control tool for the modern software development ecosystem. And because of that, it is really important that pretty much all developers be familiar with how to use Git and be comfortable with using it in their daily work practices. Knowing how to use Git effectively will make you a better developer. So I would think most folks would at least be somewhat familiar with some common Git commands. Things like git init for creating a new repository, git add for preparing to save some files, git commit for actually making the commit and saving them, git push to send your changes to another repository, git pull to download changes that someone else has made. And then, of course, there's the git motivate origin command with the -- qualify proposed submodule option. You do know what git motivate origin does, right? Well, let's look at the instruction page. The instruction page says that git motivate origin motivates some unstaged origins inside various pruned local indices. Okay, this is not actually a real Git command. There's actually a humor website called the Git man page generator, which you click a button and it generates a random fake Git instruction page. But the problem is, like, if you look at this sounds like a real Git instruction page. And unfortunately, Git can be very confusing. And the real Git instruction pages look about that confusing. So there are some problems. A lot of people find it difficult to learn Git. The command line tool can be very inconsistent. The meanings of the different commands are hard to understand. And Git uses a lot of terms that people haven't heard before. So of course, XKCD has some jokes about how hard it is to use Git. And they're kind of funny because they're true. But what I've found is that if you can take some time to learn a little bit about how Git works inside, the rest of how Git behaves starts to become more understandable. So let's take a step back and let's talk a little bit about how Git actually stores your data. Git really just tracks content that you've saved. And by content, I mean any kind of file or any kind of object of bytes in memory. And Git tracks this content by taking the data and running it through what's called a hash algorithm. And the idea, anytime you feed some bytes into the hash algorithm, it spits out a unique, very long hex string as a result. And you can see here that if I just change one little character in the input, and the hash algorithm gives me a completely different hex string as a result. And so anytime you try to add a new file to Git, Git is going to take all the data in that file, run it through the hash algorithm, and then it's going to store a copy of that file, and it's going to use the hash string as the folder and the file name to store that data. And then later on, if Git needs to look up some file, it hashes the data and checks to see if it already has a file by that name stored on disk. If you were to look at the code that actually makes up Git, Git really uses 3 different data structures to describe all the commits in your repository. The first kind of an object is called a blob, and a blob represents one file on disk. In this example, we can see that the contents of a blob is a code file. Git is going to create a hash of all the bytes in that file to identify the contents. The next object is a file tree. Once we have all these blobs stored in the Git folder, they don't have any names attached to them. So Git is going to create an object that says, here is the name of a folder. And inside of here, this folder has a file with a name. And the contents of that file right now are this blob identified by its hash ID. And Git is going to store the file tree object by hashing the tree structure. And then a commit object points to a given file tree by its hash. It points to a parent commit by its hash. And it has some additional data saying, here's the name of the person who made the commit, their email, the timestamp, and the message. So these are the 3 fundamental objects that Git is going to use to track your data. So if we look at how this works conceptually, it looks like this. A commit object is going to point to a file tree. A file tree only represents one folder, but it could point to a nested folder as another tree, and then the tree can point to a blob. And so this is how Git tracks the connections between a commit and the folders and the files. When you make multiple commits, the commits themselves form a kind of a linked list data structure. So commit C says that commit B was the one right in front of it, and commit B says that commit A came first. Git also has some objects called refs, and a ref points to one specific commit at a time. So when you make a Git branch, it is a ref object that says the branch named master points to this commit. And then Git can look backwards and see, oh, then the master branch must also contain these other commits in front of it. Every time you make a new commit, Git will modify the ref to point to the latest commit that you've just made. Because these commits form a linked list structure and all the identification is based on these hashes, if you were to try to change the contents of an earlier commit, it would have a ripple effect, and all the other commits and data after that would have a different hash instead. And Git won't actually let you do that. This means that every Git commit is immutable. Once you make it, you cannot modify it ever. That also means that you can't change the history in your Git repository. You can only make a different history instead. So this diagram kind of illustrates the typical workflow that we do on a day-to-day basis when working in our Git repository. The workspace represents the files that we have on disk in our computer right now. Git has an internal section called the staging area where we can assemble the list of files that will be committed the next time we run the commit command. And then the repository itself has all the commits that we've made. So when we run a git add or a move or an rm command, we're telling the staging area, save these changes and get ready for a commit. The commit command actually makes the new commit object and saves it. When we make a push command, we upload the new commit objects to another computer. We can fetch and pull commits that other people have made into our repo, and then we can check out the different commits to make the files on disk look the way they are in a given commit. So those are some of the ways that Git actually stores our data. Let's talk about some of the tools that we can use to work with Git on a day-to-day basis. There's a really big, one of the questions I see that comes up a lot is, should I use a Git graphical GUI tool to work with my data, or should I use the command line? And as one of my favorite memes says, why not both? So using a Git GUI makes a lot of operations a lot easier. It's easier to look at the history of the branches, to see the recent commits, to view the changes in specific files, or to pick out specific pieces of files that we want to commit. On the other hand, some things are easier with the command line. It's easy to run a single command and add all the files that I've modified. Sometimes it's easier to switch a branch, or even to update a branch in the background. So GUIs and the command line are both useful. Sometimes a process is easier in one or the other. There are many, many different Git GUI clients available. Some of them are free. Some of them cost money. I personally mostly use Atlassian SourceTree as my primary Git client. but I've also used Git extension for Windows and Git fork and Sublime merge because some of them have features that the other tools don't have. There's even some Git tools that are like graphical interfaces based inside a command line terminal. So some of these might be useful as well. Most editors and development environments have some Git capabilities built in. JetBrains tools have some excellent Git capabilities. VS Code's Git integration is kind of so-so. I actually don't like it all that much, but there are some very nice extensions like Git history and Git lens. Beyond that, I actually like using a couple of additional tools to see changes in files and help me resolve merge conflicts. Things like beyond compare and diff merge. So let's talk about some techniques for working with Git files and branches. One thing I found is that the standard git log command doesn't really show me very good information. And so one of the first things I do anytime I install Git on a new computer is I browse to this website and I copy paste this very long command and I run it inside my terminal. And this creates a new alias called git-lg. And this command will tell Git, run the log command, but format the output to look much, much better. And so you can see that it shows the commit IDs, the messages, the timestamps, the dates, and in fact, it even shows some of the branch structure here inside the terminal. So this is much, much better than the default git log command. And I really recommend adding this to your own Git system. I think a lot of people assume that if I'm adding my changes, I have to add an entire file at once. And that's not true. Git will actually let you pick and choose parts of a file to add in the next commit. Now, you can do that from the command line with a command called git add-p, but this is something that I think GUI tools like SourceTree do a lot better because I can click and choose specific lines or sections and then just click a button and add that to the staging area. You can also run a command called git add-u to add any modified files all at once. Hopefully you're familiar with the git merge command, which lets you take some work that somebody else has done on another branch and combine that into the branch that you're working on. So perhaps you are working on a feature branch and someone else has pushed some changes into master and you want to get those changes down so you have them also. Or perhaps you're done with your feature branch and you want to merge it back into the master branch. The git merge command does that from the command line. However, sometimes we want to download the changes that someone else has made. Normally, we would have to switch to the other branch and run the git pull command and then switch back to the branch we were on already. And that's kind of annoying. There's actually a very useful trick that lets you sort of download and pull another branch in the background without having to switch to it first. So if you run git fetch, the name of the remote repository, and then the name of the remote branch, name of the local branch, it's kind of like you did a pull and switch back, but you didn't have to switch. So for example, git fetch, origin as the remote repository, and then most of the time, the remote branch name and the local branch name are the same. I use this one all the time. Git has a stash, which lets you save some changes you haven't actually committed yet. And then you can apply those changes to your working copy anytime later. You can give the stashes names, or you can kind of treat them as a stack and just push them and pop them. Git also lets us kind of rewrite our history. Now, I said earlier that we can't modify the history, but we can create a new history. And this is useful for things like maybe you made a commit and then you realize, oh no, I was going to add one other file in that commit. So the git commit -- amend command lets you replace the most recent commit on your branch with a different one. And so typically this is like, oops, I made a typo, or I forgot to add one file, and it just switches the most recent commit for the new one. You can also use git reset to pretend that some newer commits didn't happen. And this takes 3 different arguments which affect how your files are stored on disk. The soft argument leaves all the files the same. It doesn't change anything. It just pretends that the commits didn't happen. So if I jump backwards, now I still have a bunch of files that look like they're changes waiting to be saved. The mixed option keeps the files on disk, but clears and resets the staging area. And the hard flag will wipe out any changes that you don't have committed. Sometimes you want to do this, but this is a big red button. Be very careful about pressing that one. Sometimes we made a commit earlier and we want to sort of do the opposite action to make the changes go away. So whereas git reset just pretends that the commit never happened, git revert makes a new commit that does the opposite changes of the earlier one. Git also has a command called cherry picking, where you can grab one or more individual commits from another branch and copy them onto the current branch that you're working on. This might be useful for like a bug fix. Maybe you found that there was a bug in production and you made one quick fix to make that change and push it out. But now you also need to copy that change onto your development branch because you have to have the bug fixed. So you could cherry pick the fix from the production branch to the development branch. Earlier, I said that we can use merging to combine the changes on 2 different branches. Sometimes we want to rearrange our branches in a different way. And the git rebase command lets us take a branch that we're working on, which originally started from this commit right here, and it lets us kind of like cut it off, pick it up, and move it over here so that we pretend that we actually started it from a later commit instead. In some ways, this gives us the same effect as a merge, where we're sort of combining the changes, but it skips the process of making the merge commit, and sometimes it makes the history look a little bit nicer. There's also a command called an interactive rebase. And this actually lets us modify the commits that we have on this branch in different ways. Maybe you typed the wrong commit message 5 commits ago. Or maybe you forgot to commit something and it really should have gone in that commit earlier. And I can make that one little change now, but I'd kind of like to make these 2 pieces one big commit in the middle. So interactive rebase lets you reorder, merge, delete, and edit commits that you've already made. Now, you can do this from the command line, but this is something where I feel GUI tools like SourceTree are much, much nicer because they provide an interactive dialogue where I can do things like move commits up and down in the history, delete them, or edit the message. Now, sometimes you get into a position where it looks like you lost your data. Like maybe you ran git reset -- hard and you've lost some of the recent commits. Don't worry, don't panic. Git has a command called the ref log, where it saves every single commit that you've made. And you can actually check those out and kind of recover the changes that you made. So you won't need to use all those techniques all the time, but they're very handy things to have in your bag if you need them. So finally, let's talk about some useful best practices for using Git. First, try to make very small focused commits. Sometimes you're working on a task and it kind of grows and you end up making edits to lots of files at the same time. Don't just add all the files at once and make one big commit, because it's going to be harder to understand why you made those changes. Instead, look at all the changes and say, well, I can break this down into several small pieces and make one commit for each of those different concepts that you did. This also kind of helps force you to review the changes even before you're making the commits. When you're writing a commit message, it's a good practice to always try to start the commit message with an issue ID if your team is using some kind of an issue tracker like GitHub or Jira. And that way, if someone looks at the history later, they can go back to the issue tracker to have a better understanding of why someone made those changes. The first line of your commit message should be a very short, high-level summary. Don't add multiple lines. Don't make it entire sentences. Just a very short summary of what you did. But then, if you need to add more details, add a blank line, and then you can write as many bullet points or paragraphs as you want. Most Git tools will show the first line in the history, and then you can expand the additional commit message to read more details if you want to. I like to think of making commits as telling a story. I want my teammates to be able to look at my commits and to be able to follow the progress that I made and understand what I did, but more importantly, why I made those changes. So I try to make sure to use interactive rebase to clean up my commits before I push my branch. Just because I tried it 3 different ways and the first 2 didn't work out, or I had to make like a work in progress commit to pause and save my changes, nobody needs to see that 5 years from now. So you kind of like want to tell the imaginary best story of, if I did this work the right way the first time, what does someone else need to know about how I did it? So it's not just about saving changes. It's about helping future developers understand what changed. And finally, when you're using those commands that rewrite history, it's very, very important that you only rewrite history that has not been pushed to another repo. Because if you've pushed it, someone else might have pulled that old history and they expect to see it. In very rare cases, you can use a push -- force with lease to overwrite what you already pushed, but that should be a last resort. So I've got some links to some other articles. In fact, this presentation is based on a very long blog post I wrote called Using Git for Version Control Effectively. I will put up the slides for this on my blog, but I also recommend reading through the blog post where I've gone through this in more detail. And then both the slides and the blog post have links to a number of other articles about how to use Git the right way. So I hope this has given you some information about some of the very cool things you can do with Git. And I hope that this helps you and your team use Git more effectively as you continue in your developer journey. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. This was like, I wrote down in the comments, this is the first time I dive so deep into Git. And it's awesome. Like, I learned a few new things, even though I'm using Git for like a few years. So people ask for the presentation, and as you mentioned, if you can drop down the link in the comments later on.
Sure.
Just go into YouTube and put the link. We have one question from the audience. Are focused commits still atomic commits?
I'm not sure exactly what the question asker means by those terms. Typically, when I hear the term atomic commit, what that means is that each commit by itself is sort of a self-contained set of changes. And typically the idea is that each commit only covers one specific concept at a time. And a lot of times people will try to make sure that, like, if I made any code changes, that all of my tests are still passing at the same time. Like I said, this is kind of up to you and your team to decide exactly what you're going to do. Like if I'm if I'm working on commits, it's very likely that no one will try to, well, say I push a branch that has like 5 or 10 commits in it. It's very likely that no one will try to run commit number 7 by itself. But it's still a good practice to try to make it so that if someone tried to run commit number 7 by itself, that the code is okay, that the tests pass, that nothing's broken. But the other thing is, if that one commit only covers a few very small specific changes, it's very easy to look at the diff in that commit to see what I was trying to do. It's easier to kind of see the story that I'm telling, and it's also easier to undo the changes in that commit if it turns out I need to back it out later.
Yeah, great tips. We have a few more questions popping here in the comments, but unfortunately, we do not have the time to answer them all. So I welcome you, Mark, to go to YouTube and try to answer them. And if not, everyone can reach out to you on Twitter, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, perfect. So if you didn't get your answer here, you can follow up with Mark on Twitter. He would be happy to follow up. So thank you very much, Mark, for dedicating the time. I know you have a busy day today, so.
Day job. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So we are almost got to the end of the event. And if you don't want to miss our future, the monthly dev events, I welcome you to subscribe to our channel so you will get notified whenever we publish a new event. And every event is also recorded, so if you missed the last events, you can check them out. We have tons of great content for you. So feel free to watch it. In the last event, we started a giveaway with epic prizes for our daily.dev ambassadors. Last time we gave an Apple Watch, and today we will announce the winner of the Razer Black Widow keyboard. So, if you want to hear who won, let's see. So, our winner for this month is Ezekiel Leitis. Hopefully I pronounced it right, although I most definitely didn't. We will reach out to you if you are here with all the details, so keep your eyes on the mailbox, and congratulations, you won this amazing keyboard. And if you folks didn't have the chance to win our epic prize, so don't worry, the next month we have another great prize that we are giving away, and it's a Sony headphones with noise cancelling. And basically the competition starts now, and all you have to do is to invite your friends to daily.dev. And although the event is over, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are doing some kind of a test today. We are doing an after party on Twitter Spaces. So if you want to tune in, just open your Twitter on the mobile device, follow the daily.dev account, and go ahead and join the spaces. We will talk about anything you want. This is a great chance for us to talk to you and see what you are up to. So thank you very much for everyone who joined today. Thanks for the speakers who dedicated their time, and see you all soon in the next event. Bye-bye.